And as we mentioned there, the death toll has gone up. He was talking about 88. It's now in excess of 120. Now, Donald Trump has been in office since January the 20th this year as the 47th president of the United States. He was, of course, also the 45th president between 2017 to 2021. So how do we characterize Africa's relationship so far with the Trump administration? Well, it's been tested by many issues, not least the U.S. government's retreat from multilateralism, keeping in mind that Mr. Trump's first term was typified by limited engagement with the continent, as well as that rather spicy comment about what he thought about some African countries. So how should Africa position itself in today's more transactional U.S. approach amid tariffs and a challenging global order? Well, from all this, I'm joined now in the studio by the researcher and writer on African political economy, Chibuikem Ugo Ngadi, who is currently pursuing a PhD in public policy and political economy at King's College in London. Good to see you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you very much indeed for coming in. How do you think African leaders are getting on at the moment with Donald Trump and his administration in this newly fangled, transactional and pseudo-autocratic world that the US president is creating?
Well, I think there is no cohesive overall strategy by a coalition of African leaders as to how to engage the new U.S. president. However, I think different presidents have opted for different approaches. Cyril Ramaphosa in South Africa, who has been under a lot of fire recently, has preferred a more conversational approach than perhaps anyone in the Sahelian states, for example, who have moved more who have dug their heels into their anti-Western views and opposed him quite unilaterally. But yeah, I don't think there is a cohesive approach to how they approach relating with Donald Trump, and I fear that there is an absence of strategy. I think in the case of Nigeria, our foreign minister and president talk about Nigeria being a grown-up state. They talk about Nigeria being a state that is an adult in international relations and can look after itself. To what extent that is true remains to be seen, and I'm watching just like everyone else.
Indeed, and of course you mentioned South Africa.
Right.
That relationship comes to mind. What do you make of how that relationship has unfolded, particularly in light of Mr. Trump's use of South Africa as a mirror for U.S. domestic debates on race and land, to borrow your own words from one of your articles?
Yes. And you see, this is the point I try and drive home to Nigerians about how Trump will engage with Africa. When I speak to people about Trump and Africa, there's a wing of people who tell me that, because he's America first, because he's more insular, and therefore he will leave Africa alone. But you have to understand, Trump's self-interested, America first view of the world will encourage him to only engage on issues that he thinks are beneficial to his own conversations. Now, if you look at the US with the anti-affirmative action, anti-DEI, this idea that the white people in America are being repressed, South Africa mirrors that perfectly. 7% of the South African population is white. They own 70% of the land. And now the South African government, in their own way, although not perfect, is trying to, equalize this imbalance. And Trump now sees that issue as an opportunity to see, look, they're doing it to them over there. Soon they're going to do it to you over here. It's not as though he cares deeply about African issues, or he cares about even the white South Africans. But just like the British and the Americans did with Zimbabwe with Mugabe all those years ago, I think the same issues are playing out today. So what Trump, at the very least, is not reducing U.S. imperialism. He's just way more self-interested in it. And if hard power is all that remains, and then that would not respect African sovereignty either.
That's a very interesting assessment. So what would Donald Trump want to do with Africa in terms of American interests on the continent, given that many people, almost like you were suggesting there, believe that he appears to have a negative attitude towards Africans generally?
I think whether Trump has a negative or positive attitude towards a country does not impact, how he sees whether it will benefit him or not. I think, for example, if we look at the Congo, Trump, who is insular, has had extensive conversations with the Congolese president and the rest of the Congolese political establishment about intervening in Goma, in the crisis in Goma being instigated by the Rwandan-backed forces in the Eastern Congo.
And M23 rebels.
Yes, and he's doing it in exchange for a renewed and premium access to Congo's resources. So it's not about whether he likes the Congolese or not, or whether he sees them in positive light or not. It's about what they can do to him. We see it with his relations with the Emiratis and the rest of the Gulf states. It's about what they can do for him.
At the heart of it is that transactional.
At the heart of it is transactionalism. The idea is, what can you as a state do for me? The US has presided over this global order. This is how he sees it. The US has presided over this global order for the past 60 to 70 years, and we've done it all, and we have barely gotten anything in return. And look, that's why you don't have a job here in the Midwest. You don't have a job. Now I'm here to extract all the benefits that we have given all these other nations. And that is precisely how his political philosophy guides him, including with the tariff conversation you were having with the economist earlier.
Indeed.
Yeah.
So how should Africans react to that? How should they shape their role in this new, often contradictory world order that Donald Trump is fashioning?
In one of the responses to my essays that left me thinking a lot about the current African reality is that, because the US is no longer seen as this beacon of democracy, and believe it or not, the US was seen in very positive light, but as Trump and Biden with Gaza and co are starting to decline that image, what I'm starting to realize, and what a lot of scholars are starting to realize, is our views of democracy are very intertwined with our views of America. And as soon as we continue not to see them as this, this house on the hill, perhaps, there are those on the continent who are feeling that, democracy is no longer the best way forward. And it's leading to a lot of views on a lot of appetite for authoritarian leadership, like Dr. Gigi Okeke found at the UN Development Program, where, African youths are saying, democracy hasn't paid us dividends and stuff. And I'd like to caution against that, because I think democracy, despite its ills, remains the most potent form to manage our ethnic, tribal, religious divisions. And it's the easiest and the most practical way, to me, to build consensus amongst the people. And instead of offering some kind of faux Pan-Africanist incentive that is kind of built on just anti-Westernism and nothing else, is not, in my opinion, the path forward. And I think that's the argument I've been trying to make to Africans wherever I see them. It is not enough to just be anti-West.
Right.
Yeah.
And in terms of, we're almost out of time here. In terms of ordinary people of African descent, Mr. Trump seems to have considerable support, with many seeming to admire his style and the fact that he seems to be iconoclastic. That kind of appeals to many young people. He's also popular with people of the hip-hop community, for example, even though he's been accused of racism. What is it about him that seems to appeal to that demographic? Briefly.
Particularly with the African people, I think Trump in many ways is an African leader. He's a strong man. He has a large character. If you think about our Mugabes, our Gaddafi, he has a lot in common with a lot of African leaders. And I think that, and he has a lot of conservative views, which, as you know, Africa is a very conservative continent. And I think there's a lot of familiarity with people when they see Trump. Same with the African American community. It's a victim of long days of oppression and stuff. And a lot of the people who have participated in that oppression look like Trump. They sound like Trump. They're as boisterous as Trump. And I think there's a lot of familiarity in there. Some may call it Stockholm syndrome. I'm not qualified to make those psychological assertions, but I think there are a lot of parallels in that situation, and I think that is what draws them to him. But again, I will say, as a final note, I know we're done, I'm a huge believer in an engaged citizenry. I talk about Nigeria a lot. It's my preoccupation, and people tell me, oh, we're never going to make it, or Africa is never going to make it. The only way we know for sure that this country or this continent is never going to make it, if we completely disengage. If there is a 1% chance that we can take this country to this country or this continent to the next step, that we can improve our standard of living, improve our economic outcomes, then it's important that each and every one of us stay engaged, stay making the right arguments, stay fighting for for a freer and a much more improved continent and country.
Well, that's very inspiring.
Thank you.
I want to thank you very much indeed
Thank
for
you
coming
so much for having me. Lovely.
Chibuikem Ugo Ngadi, not
Yes.
Ngadi,
Ngadi.
because that's what I called you
Yes,
initially.
yes.
Ngadi is currently pursuing a PhD in public policy and political economy at King's College London.
I also have a
He's
Substack if people would like to
Sorry?
subscribe. I have a Substack, a blog post at Economics on Substack. If you'd like to subscribe,
Okay.
please feel free. Thank you.
And he's also a researcher and writer on African political economy. Thank you
so
very much indeed for coming
Thank you so much
here.
for having me, Charles. Thank you very much.